the last video I shot, I don't know what happened. My face wasn't there. Hope the video's still good. But this one is by SCP Explain Stories and Animation. Like, comment, subscribe to SCP Explain Stories and Animation. This SCP is SCP-900, City of the Sun. Don't know what that means. So let's get this shit started. Like, comment, subscribe to SCP Explain Stories and Animation.
Ocean, lurking far beneath the waves. There's a city that time forgot. A vast former deep in the Pacific Ocean, lurking far beneath the waves. There's a city that time forgot. A vast former metropolis that acted as a battleground for two gods, one above and one below. All that's visible above the water level is an island, less than 5 kilometers across, the lonely home of an entity that would look almost human to the untrained eye. You'd never guess she was thousands of years old. Perhaps you're wondering why you've never seen photos of this place. Strangely, it isn't just because of the containment efforts of the SCP Foundation. Anything but the most rudimentary ancient technology used on the island is liable to break the second you try to use it. The mechanism's flooded with seawater. But if you have any communication devices on you, you'll receive some strange messages on them before they stop working. Invader, run, murderer, and the enigmatic word, Naktumpkin. All of this would be strange enough already. But the deeper the Foundation delved into the island, the buried city, and their thousand secrets, the more dangerous the anomaly known as SCP-900 became.
Everyone's hitting so much good.
Orange, off the rip, off the rip!
Well,
Dangerous the anomaly known as SCP-900 became.
hold on for a second, peeps, and peep that. Right there. Had to get some coffee. Alright, let's continue.
Buried city and murderer, and the enigmatic word, Naktumpkin. All of this would be strange enough already. But the deeper the Foundation delved into the island, the buried city, and their thousand secrets, the more dangerous the anomaly known as SCP-900 became. It began with Site-78, a Foundation site hidden within a decommissioned oil rig several miles beyond the effective range of SCP-900. At the time, the anomaly was believed to encompass the entire sunken city and the small island at its center. No facility could be constructed closer, partially to preserve the function of diagnostic equipment, and partially to avoid other more severe consequences too. More on that shortly. You'll find out just as violently and abruptly as the Foundation did. Wanting to know more about what exactly was going on the island, the research team requisitioned the help of Mobile Task Force GR-87, also known as the Analog Freaks. Their mission was to infiltrate the island directly and establish a base camp. Once this was achieved, they would communicate with the staff on Site-78 with the aid of a heliograph, a mirror that allowed people to communicate with each other remotely through reflecting light off of it at specific coded intervals. 4 team members arrived on the island together: Agent Tenor, Agent Penny, Agent Briggs, and Agent Saxony. It was meant to be a simple reconnaissance mission before everything went sideways, and 2 people died horrific deaths. When Tenor and his team arrived, he gave Penny and Briggs instructions to set up the heliograph, while he and Saxony prepared to investigate the island on foot. However, before any of them could get their bearings, as Agent Penny opened a tripod and steadied it against the sand, he collapsed to the ground and began to flail in what seemed like terrible agony. If this situation wasn't chaotic enough, just as Agent Briggs was desperately trying to help Agent Penny, Tenor noticed the humanoid entity cresting over the hill nearby. She came running towards them, pointing and screaming in a language that none of them understood. This was enough for Agent Saxony to make a fatal mistake, pulling out his service pistol and preparing to fire at the anomalous woman. However, just as his finger curled around the trigger, he let out an unimaginable scream of animal pain and collapsed down onto the ground, brown marks suddenly appearing on his skin like a network of veins. When Tenor tried to grab him and perform CPR, he was taken aback by the extreme heat coming off of Saxony's chest. Little did Tenor know at the time that attempting to perform violence against the only inhabitant of SCP-900 had caused his heart to literally burst into a terrible inferno inside his chest. Meanwhile, Penny writhed.
Pay the rent debt today or I'll evict you!
I promise, I'll pay!
heart to
Freaking
literally
AI,
burst
bro.
into a terrible inferno inside his chest.
Oh,
Meanwhile,
shit.
Penny writhed on the ground while Briggs tried to help him, doing mouth to mouth. Briggs would later state that she found an overwhelmingly salty taste in her mouth while trying, in vain, to save Penny, who then lurched forward and vomited up a salty red spew before keeling over and dying on the sand. Meanwhile, the roaring flames that had consumed Saxony's heart had now devoured his entire body, reducing him to little more than a burnt husk. For fear that the same would happen to the rest of them, Tenor and Briggs leapt onto the life raft and paddled away, knowing that even that would be preferable to either of the fates that he'd just watched his own comrades experience.
Yeah.
This was how the Foundation learned that any human who attempted to build a structure on the island would suddenly find their lungs filling up with seawater, leading to them drowning inside the prison of their own body. And anyone who tries to commit harm against the island's single inhabitant. Tenor, in his debrief, recommended that the Foundation abandon this whole case and leave immediately. He had a gut feeling that this wouldn't end well for any of them. Naturally, this request was ignored. But if it hadn't been, who knows how many people would have been saved.
Yeah.
Clearly, the Foundation would need to take a very different set of tactics if they hoped to get this island under wraps. They couldn't build the site any closer, as doing so would invite death, and they couldn't lead an assault against the island and the woman living on it for that very same reason. That was why they brought in senior researcher Dr. Catherine Kipp, whose language expertise would allow her to communicate with the humanoid in her own language, an otherwise dead tongue known as Burbak. In speaking to this mysterious entity, Dr. Kipp was given a number of tantalizing answers, and even more bizarre and frightening questions. What can you expect with an anomaly as weird, ancient, and dangerous as SCP-900? In the interview, the being claimed to have once gone by the name Kartika, a priestess of the sun. Naturally, Dr. Kipp asked Kartika about the meaning of that mysterious word, Naktumpkin. Kartika claimed it was a sacred process to her long-extinct people, an ascendancy to become one with the sun goddess herself up above. But they had not always been devotees of the sun. Once they had been nocturnal creatures of the forests, locked in an endless battle with entities that Kartika had described as being almost like humans, but wild, more powerful. That rung Foundation alarm bells, and gave them a sense of just how far back this whole story went. These entities were known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-1000, and known to the general public as Bigfoot. These entities had once been the most powerful beings on Earth. They ruled it as a nocturnal kingdom. Humans and other species, such as Kartika's own, cowered at the fringes of reality, struggling to survive as the apes' advanced empire expanded relentlessly. In response to all this, humans and Kartika's species both took refuge in the aid of more powerful beings. For humans, it meant courting the patronage of a cruel trickster spirit of the forest, who gave them the tools to advance themselves at the cost of the grand species and civilization of SCP-1000. This reduced them to little more than beasts, stripped of even the intelligence that had allowed them to advance so far. Kartika's species took a different deal. They went out to the sea, where a great city was created for them at the behest of two gods, the god of the ocean and the goddess of the sun. The sun acted as the guide that allowed them to build the city, and the ocean acted as the defense that protected the city on all sides from hostile animals and dangerous spirits. When members of SCP-1000 tried to attack the city in great vessels, the ocean itself reared up and drowned them all. With the kindness of the two gods, it seemed that this place could be an eternal paradise for Kartika's people. But of course, how long could a good thing like that ever really last? Kartika spoke to Dr. Kipp many times, giving her answers, but always tempering them with what felt like half an answer and half like a threat. Kipp and her friend should leave the area, or soon something terrible would happen to them, just like had happened to their other bestial predecessors. Kipp didn't get the sense that Kartika was making a threat over something that she herself would do, more that she was referring to some power far higher than her, the whims of the gods themselves. When Kipp and the rest of the Foundation personnel did not heed this warning, Kartika returned again, hoping to tell them some dark memories of hers that were resurfacing in light of the human intrusion into her cursed land. She told Dr. Kipp how there had once been harmony under the auspices of the sun and the sea. The one remaining structure on the island, an ancient ceremonial ziggurat, where the
Sorry if I'm not talking. I'm just interested in this whole story right now. Like, this is interesting. Sorry.
Priestess of the Sun had helped the people ascend to a sense of oneness with the blessed Sun. Kartika seemed deeply emotional as she recounted the glory years of what her world had once been, saying, "The people gave back to their gods the best they could. The sun was given a temple atop the highest mountain, and the people listened to its teachings. The sea was given the dead as thanks for its protection. For a long time this was satisfactory, but slowly the sea became jealous of its twin." The point of contention came from a sense of dualism, the separation of the body and the soul. When anyone on the island died, their bodies were ritualistically cast into the sea so that the ocean god could claim them as a tribute. The problem was the souls became separated from their bodies upon death and floated skywards to the company of the sun, leaving the world of the ocean cold and lonely. After spending so long defending this civilization from the countless attacks of outsiders,
Someone DM'd me on
Oh my
LinkedIn. I have the
God.
most experience on my team, but someone with less experience got promoted over me. Why?
spending so long defending this civilization from the countless attacks of outsiders, the ocean god felt as though it had been cheated and would take its prize from the islanders by force. Immediately, terrible storms began to rock the island. Rain poured down, lashing against the surface of the island like torrents of freezing knives. Huge waves swallowed up the buildings along the coast, dragging entire families out into watery graves. It was an absolute massacre, and nobody had any idea who would be next. In response, many of the islanders decided to begin worshiping the ocean, giving it the validation it had so ardently desired. But that caused its own problems. The sun felt betrayed by these changes in loyalty, and like any vengeful god, she decided to smite the heretics, striking the island with sun rays that vaporized many of those who decided to go against the being that had once instructed them on how to build this very sanctuary.
Wow.
Now the islanders were effectively sandwiched between a pair of angry, petty gods, warring for dominance over their love and fealty. One of the sun priestesses was horrified by the violence that had consumed her home, and in the death of her people at the hands of the very deities that she had devoted her life to serving. She fell to her knees and wept, praying that the horrors would end and that her people would be safe. Kartika was on the verge of openly weeping as she said this, recounting with vivid detail. She said, inspired by the priestess's prayer for peace, the sea claimed the city its twin had built. There was no more to fight over. The sea left only a mountain, and the priestess who had inspired it. Seizing its followers at the last second, the sun banished the priestess from its realm. The sea provided her kindness for a time, but refused to take her lest the war begin anew. She lives on the mountain today, trapped. While by some metrics Dr. Kip was technically a genius, you really didn't need to be a genius to intuit that Kartika herself was the priestess in her own tale of woe. Sharing the knowledge that pained her so was Kartika's greatest hope of convincing Dr. Kip and the rest of the Foundation personnel to leave before a similarly awful fate befell them. The ocean, after all, had consumed everyone else who had tried in vain to conquer the land that it had swallowed up and laid claim to. This allowed Dr. Kip to understand, at the very least, some of the terrible things that had transpired on the ill-fated first mission from the analog freaks onto the island months ago at this point. When Agent Penny had attempted to build a structure on the island at the center of SCP-900, he had created an insult to the ocean that had claimed the island as its own. As such, he punished Agent Penny by transposing saltwater into his lungs and leading towards a terrifying and painful death. And as for Agent Saxony, in attempting to shoot Kartika in his state of panic, he was effectively attempting to steal a priestess from the sun. As such, the sun incinerated his heart as punishment, spreading the fire out through his body and destroying him entirely. Clearly, neither the sun nor the ocean likes it when you attempt to take what they believe to be their own. Something that everyone at Site-78 would soon realize. Just as Kartika had predicted, it wasn't long after she shared her memory that a terrible storm began to descend onto Site-78, one that could be seen from the site itself, but was somehow completely undetectable from above. Many radioed for help, but it seemed to do no good as the storm got closer and more powerful by the moment. Dr. Kip, perhaps frustrated by her own inability to heed the warning, commandeered a vessel and the few members of personnel closest to her. They sailed away towards the island in the middle of SCP-900, as giant roaring waves consumed the base and everyone on it. By the time that reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left. Though strangely, for the first ever time, technology seemed to work in the island's proximity. Long lens cameras pointed towards the island, showing multiple figures standing on the island's lone structure. Along with Kartika was Dr. Caroline Kipp, along with the Foundation refugees who had sailed away to the island. Now they were all dressed in what appeared to be traditional island garb. It seemed that the island's only priestess wasn't alone anymore. Now go check out archaic SCPs that should have never been.
Damn. So, shit. At least she's not alone no more, but damn, bro. That's sad. These guys are freaking petty. See? You pray for something good to happen, somebody get jealous. Why are you getting jealous for? I don't get the gods, but okay. Have a good one, everybody.